Hi, everybody. Hopefully, you can hear me all right. I am happy to be here today. As you no doubt can see, I am calling from a different location today. I am not in my home where I usually record my episodes and live streams. I'm traveling, but I brought some of my equipment with me because I thought I might want to do something on the road. And so here we are. Um, Hopefully, my jury rigged setup is going to work. I noticed that things are shaking, so I'm going to try not to touch anything. Okay, so thank you all for joining me. I'm really excited to be here and to respond to some of your questions. That is the point of today's live stream. So we'll give it a few minutes for some of the others to start to join us. Hopefully that will happen soon. Um, some housekeeping stuff. So I am really excited to announce that my member community has now been launched. It's called the Captain's Quarters. We'll talk about that more later in the episode today. But I am very excited by the turnout so far and by some of the things that we have lined up already. This theme has got me interested in discussing purpose and fulfillment and mission and self development because the member community isn't exclusively about relationships. There's a lot of questions about relationships that are happening in the bulletin boards, and I assume in the consultations as well. We'll have our first one next week. But it's not exclusively about that because I want to speak to the whole person. And obviously, relationships are very important for us, but they're not the whole story. So, this is a place to come together to ask questions and to grow and to network about business and success and health and general happiness, because that's really what I want to foster is a place where people can continue to grow and become the best versions of themselves. So, that's what I was inspired to launch this live stream today to talk about questions on that topic, if you have any. Usually, I respond to the super chats because there's already a lot of comments in the chat, and it would be very boring if I just read through all of them like that. Um, so I will prioritize the super chat questions, and I hope we get through as many as we can in the time that we have together. So, what's going on? What can I do for you guys? I don't see anything so far. So, oh, yeah. Some of you have figured out where I am. I'm in Japan. I'm in Tokyo, which is one of my favorite places in the world. And so I have been doing a lot here. It's been an unusual trip. It's not what I was expecting, but it has been a good trip so far. Um, among other things, I came here to begin writing another book, which I sat down to do for the first week or so that I was here. I have a pretty good idea for what I'd like this book to be, but when I sat down to actually write it, it wasn't really coming out the way that I wanted it to. I enjoyed the content, but it was coming out a little too complex, a little too intellectual, which I didn't think would fly for the project that I had in mind. So I struggled with that for a while, and then I decided that maybe the content wasn't fully incubated yet. I found that when I fully understand something, it tends to just sort of come out of me in a more simplified form. And the fact that this was kind of a struggle and was still fairly complex to me suggested that it wasn't quite ready for um, putting out into the world. So I've tabled that idea for now. I have a few other ideas for projects that I'd like to be working on, but then I switched my attention to building community, which is something that um, I'm very excited about. Okay. All right. Still no super chats. Oh, here we go. We got one. What do we have here? Oh, somebody just wanted to send me a little bit of cash, I guess, 4.99. Hovo50, thank you very much. If you have a question that would help to move this live stream forward, I'm here for you guys. Okay, here we go. Voodoo2130, thank you for kicking it off. Good day, Orion. Thanks for another Q&A. My question is, how do you cultivate emotional intimacy with a woman in the early stage of dating? Okay, so I assume by the fact that you're talking about early stage of dating that you haven't yet slept together. So we're talking about emotional intimacy as opposed to physical intimacy. With women in general, emotional intimacy tends to precede the physical intimacy. It's one of the keys that can unlock the physical dimension of a relationship. Emotional intimacy is not that difficult to do, though if another person doesn't want to join you in it, there's not much that you can do to entice them into it. It's sort of like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink kind of a thing. The best way that I've found of inducing emotional intimacy is to be emotionally vulnerable yourself and to see what the other person does with that. Now, vulnerability is something that gets a bad rap. I don't love the word myself because it's wrapped up in these associations of weakness. Vulnera means wound in Latin. So it feels like a weakness, a wounding, and it doesn't have to be that. What I would say that the best form of vulnerability for a date is what I would call self involving self disclosure, which is where you just make it known that kind of how you're feeling and you take risks to share your emotional state with your date. And this will also prompt her to potentially match your level of intimacy. It's like a dance. You don't want to just dump your purse out on the table and start sharing all of your childhood traumas with somebody you just met. That's a bad idea. That's like going from 0 to 6,000, right? So you want to do it gradually, step by step. And you do that by revealing a little bit about yourself. You can do this just by talking about your day. There's a way that you can make pretty much anything um, fodder for emotional connection. For example, a lot of guys would answer the question, "What'd you do today?" very factually. You'd be like, "Oh, okay, I woke up, I went to work, I came home, I went to the gym, I read a book." It's just like a list of activities. And the issue is that doesn't really tell me much about the person who's going through those activities. Like, do you love your work? Was there something surprising that happened? How are you feeling after the gym? Or do you have specific goals in mind? So it's like you can take that question and begin to put a little bit more transparency and openness into your response, and that will likely stimulate that kind of emotional disclosure in the date, right? So an example of that could be like, "Oh, I woke up today. It's one of those days I just wish I could have just pulled the covers back up and stayed in bed." You know what I mean? But when I got out of bed, I saw that the sun was shining, and I was like, "Oh, fuck, this is actually really beautiful." Went to work. It's been a little stressful at work today, but I'm really happy with the progress that I've been making on this project. It's one of the first ones I've been psyched about in a long time. I went to the gym. It was kind of hard to go to the gym, but I forced myself to go because it's really important to me. You see, you're sharing a lot, which is also being a generous communicator, right? Which is something that I talk about on the channel, and which gives your conversation partner a lot to work with. And you're also like training this person to say, "This is kind of what I expect. I want this conversation to be about the person inside of the facts," right? Otherwise, it just becomes an interview. Where are you from? What do you do? How many siblings do you have? That's really boring. And you could just fill that out on a survey at home. And if like dating really had to do with the answers to those questions, those factual questions, you wouldn't even have to meet the person at all. It could just be some checklists and a picture, right? And we know that doesn't really work. People don't like that. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. All right. Got some new questions coming in. Let's do this. Okay. Edward Scornfield, thank you for your support. Have you studied general semantics? I don't know if general semantics is a specific term, actually. I've studied some semantics, but not in a formal way. I'm interested in lots of different things. So, kind of a yes no question. I think semantics are important. I don't think I've ever done any kind of specific course of study in that. Okay. Barrett Melton, thank you for your support. You claim women trade sex for relationships. However, women enjoy sex too. Never said they didn't. Doesn't that balance the scales such that women sacrifice almost nothing compared to men? Finance support for intimacy. Doesn't that balance the scales such that women sacrifice almost nothing compared to men for intimacy? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Okay. So women definitely enjoy sex too. There's this really great story from Greek mythology where there was this prophet called, I think he was Tiresias, who once angered Hera, Zeus's wife, by helping him hide one of his affairs. And I believe she turned him into a woman. So this person lived for a time as a man and as a time as a woman. And this was, I think, the only human at that time who had had that kind of experience. Sometime later, the gods got into some argument about who enjoyed sex more. Was it men or was it women? And they figured that no one could really answer that question because they didn't really have the experience except for this person, Tiresias, right? So they called Tiresias to settle the matter. And Tiresias says that the woman enjoys the sex 9 times as much as the man does. Like the woman gets 9 times as much pleasure as the man does. And this pissed off Hera, who I think punished him again in some kind of a way. So, absolutely, women do enjoy sex. They get a lot of pleasure out of it when it's done well. Um, but that's something that I think women kind of want to keep on the DL for some reason. Now, it could be a social shaming thing, and they're trying to protect their respectability. It could also be a strategy in the game of please no, even if it's an unconscious one. Namely, if you know how much I really want something, that's going to increase the amount I'm probably going to have to pay for it. That's why when you go into a car dealership, you're like, you don't walk in and go like, oh my God, this is the best car I've ever seen. Holy shit. I love the color. I love the sheen. I love the wheels. You're like, yeah, it's okay. It's an okay car. I could take it. I could leave it. And that gives you a more advantageous bargaining posture, right? So there could be many different reasons why there's this general unwillingness to talk about how much women enjoy sex. Does that balance the scales that women sacrifice almost nothing compared to men for intimacy? Well, it depends on who they're having sex with, my dude. So there's plenty of women who have one night stands. Like men have one night stands because there are women who have one night stands with them. Now, some of those interactions, the women don't know are going to be a one night stand or vice versa. I mean, women stand up guys after sleeping with them as well, especially in today's day and age. So, but sometimes it is. When a woman interacts with a guy primarily from the point of view of having a pleasurable sexual experience, then it does kind of balance the scales. The guy's like, hey, I think you're cute. She's like, hey, I think you're cute. Let's do this. And the guy doesn't really lose anything, not much, except for like the time and the opportunity, and vice versa. So that's pretty balanced. However, what we're talking about potentially that makes it more imbalanced is when men begin to take on the provider role because they believe it will help them secure guaranteed sex. I've been guilty of this before. I lived with a girlfriend a long time ago, and I thought to myself, wait a minute, are you saying that I could move in with my girlfriend and she'll help pay some rent? I'll pay less rent and I'll get to sleep with my roommate every night. I mean, like this is the best deal in the history of deals, dude. And it turns out it doesn't really work that way for a number of reasons. So the issue is that some guys begin to take on more and more provision because they are so focused on the sexual dimension of the relationship, whereas the woman now when she sees how much that is valued, can now kind of consciously or not take advantage of the situation. So I think that's what we're talking about when it comes to the support. I'm sorry, that's what it comes to with the balance of the scales. Is sometimes it's balanced when both parties going in specifically and intentionally to enjoy a sexual experience, but sometimes it's imbalanced where the people are using proxies, indirect means to access the sexual experience. And generally that's where men end up paying a lot more for sex. Hopefully that answers your question. Bohemian Granny, 500 yen. Awesome. I'll go get a 1 cup later. Thank you very much. Okay, Edward Scornfield. Okay, he's back. General semantics was developed by a man named Alfred Korzybski. He is one of the most avoided figures in the 20th century. Avoided for good reason, or he's like, he doesn't have the fame and attention that he deserves. Unclear. The expression based comes to mind when getting into general semantics. Okay, cool. Well, I'd never heard of the guy, so maybe that's what you mean. He's not well known. I'll take a look when I have some time. Thanks for bringing it to my attention, Edward. Okay, Carl Stein. Thank you for your donation. What are your thoughts on short men and the dating game SMV? And by short, I mean 5'5" and shorter. It's tough, man. It's tough. Like, height is a real thing. Less in real life than on the dating apps. A lot of guys will set all kinds of filters with respect to their matches on these swipey things, and women do the same thing. And I think more than anything, there's age limits that guys come up against. So guys can definitely age out of dating apps, but there's also the height thing that they can come up against, and you don't want to lie about that because that's going to put yourself out on the wrong foot if and when you do eventually meet each other. It's unlikely that's going to lead anywhere. So this is problematic for women as well, because there's a lot of things that women will tend to disqualify men for right off the bat. And these are the same things that often they have in some of their friends have, or some of their family members have, people that they care about and they love. They don't mind these things in them because the care and the love came first. And then they found out some of these other things, or they're more willing to pass over or give generous interpretations to these things. However, when it comes to a complete stranger, I found that women can be very prematurely, next kind of a thing. I saw a comment in the thread before we really got started about politics on this level. That's the same kind of issue. Is I guarantee that every woman out there knows somebody that they love and care about who is a Trump supporter. They might not know that that person is a Trump supporter, for example, but I guarantee that every person knows and loves and cares about somebody who is. So the issue, the question when they come out of the gate and say no Trump supporters, no Republicans, no people on the right. I mean, if they were to apply that consistently to everybody in their life, that would lose some of their valued relationships. And if it were really that important, they would put that criterion ahead of their own family or their friends. Some people, unfortunately, do from time to time, but most people aren't that nutty. So I think that what we have to understand is that the caring generally needs to come first, and then some of the disclosure on more sensitive subjects can occur further down the road. That's why I would recommend strongly to steer clear of discussions of politics or religion or really anything all that contentious on the first several dates. I mean, this is just about, like, can we have fun? Do we have chemistry? Do we like each other? Those kinds of things you want to talk about with respect to somebody that you want to, like, have kids with, because those concerns only become real with respect to raising children. Like, for example, if you're Christian and your partner is Muslim, okay, how do you raise your kids? Do you take them to church? You take them to mosque? You take them to both? You take them to neither? It's like some things you can't really compromise on, but there's no need to compromise when it's just two consenting adults in a relationship. I can be Christian, you can be Muslim. I don't have to make you Christian, you don't have to make me Muslim. But with the kid, like, we have to make a decision about how we're going to raise this child, right? So these really serious questions, they really only become relevant and salient when it has to do with raising kids. Otherwise, you just can respect people's differences, which is part of the fun thing about getting in relationships, is meeting people who are a little bit different from you, right? Sorry, I got a little away from the height thing. So what I'm getting at here, Carl, is that short guys probably aren't going to find a lot of luck on the apps. They have to get out there in person, and they got to um, build that kind of attraction and intimacy and connection with women. And once that's established, then these things that might be automatic deal breakers to total strangers, you might then become the exception, right? Because the feeling and the caring has now come before the criterion, which is, I guess, how it should be, right? At least how it was in many cases before online dating came into being. I think it's also a good idea to make yourself as attractive as possible in the ways that you can control, which have to do with your physique and your fashion. And if you are, jacked, or at least slim and taking care of yourself, and you have some fashion sense, and maybe you're witty, or you're intelligent, or you're funny. I mean, like, you might have to put in a little bit more effort to get the same result comparable to the 6'3" guy. You know what I'm saying? Is that fair? But I don't know, but it's the way it is. Okay. So short guys aren't out of the running, but they definitely have a little bit of a handicap, but those handicaps can be overcome. Good question. Okay. EHI, hope I got that right. Thank you for your donation. Just wondering, as a guy, how can I tell if my standards are too high looks wise? Still single at 41. It's got to be me. Had a few interest in dating me, but they are never the ones I'm attracted to. Tia. I don't know what that means. Well, I mean, that's often the case, that the ones that you're not as attracted to are the ones that are interested in dating you. That's true for a number of reasons. First of all, women who are less physically attractive, they do tend to initiate more. Like, that's starting to shift. When I would go out in San Francisco, I got hit on by women sometimes, but it was never the most attractive women in the bar, because no one was hitting on those women. So those women have kind of figured out that if they want to make something happen, they can't just sit on the bar stool and wait for the world to come to them, which is true. And you got to kind of like reward the effort a bit and appreciate that they're going out there and kind of bucking the trend to try to make something happen for themselves. That's great. Love it. But it's not the most beautiful flower. A beautiful flower gets to stay rooted in one place, and everything comes to her, right? That's the power of beauty. It could also be the case that when you are less attracted to a woman, you're far more confident. You're more likely to be your authentic self. You'll share things because you won't care what the other person thinks about you, or whether or not it's attractive, or whether or not it's going to get you laid. And that often leads to you being more authentic, confident, and you bring the other person into your confidence more. And those women often will fall in love over time. So that could also be part of the case. I talk about that in the episode, Men Do the Right Things with the Wrong Women. Are your standards too high looks wise? Well, that depends. Are you not attracted to any women whatsoever? Are you like walking down the streets and like, ugh, there's nothing here? Or are you actually attracted to women that you encounter and you're just not dating them, or they're not interested in dating you? I think those, I'm not sure about that. most likely there are women out in the world that you think are attractive, but they're not the ones that you have access to, I suppose. That could be an issue of where you're located. That could be an issue of putting yourself out there more. Um, if you're just not interested in women, I mean, that's okay. It could make life very peaceful in many respects. If you want to have a family or you want to have a relationship, obviously that's going to make things more problematic. Um, I've noticed that as I've aged, that has started to shift. Like when I was a young man, my God, all I really cared about was how physically attractive the woman was. And that has definitely shifted as I've aged. And that's actually been really pleasant and has been very helpful to having better relationships with the women in my life, which has been great. Hopefully that answers your question. Astro PA, thank you for your donation. What do you think of women who are friends with their past lovers or exes and giving an ultimatum to end it? Ooh, okay. So this is a good question. All right. So in general, I don't think it's a good idea to be giving ultimatums. Ultimatums are forms of it's their power play, and even if they work, it tends to create a lingering resentment in the person if you continue the relationship. So even if they work, that is in this case, if the woman in question to keep you from leaving stops talking to or seeing their exes, she's probably going to feel not so great about that, and you're going to feel that in your relationship. So it's a pyrrhic victory. In general, I think that love demands acceptance in many respects, and if you don't have to like everything that your partner does, but you kind of want to accept them for who they are because you would like to hope that they're going to do the same for you. And everyone's also entitled to their deal breakers. There are some things that, for whatever reason, do not want to, or you are not willing, or you are unable to accept. That's okay. But in that case, it's like find somebody that you can accept and move on. That's my general perspective on the matter. Um, and I also think, with respect to the first question, that it depends. I think that this is really a case by case basis. What is the nature of the communication? Is it still flirty? Is it still sexual? How long ago was this X? When they speak about them, what's the timbre in their voice and their tone? Do you get the sense that they're still emotionally attached to this person? Um, or and in particular, is this person also in a relationship with somebody else? Um, Not always a practical defense against mate poaching, but it often is one. Um, or is this person kind of single and orbiting and waiting in the wings for you to fuck up? In any case, what I would potentially do if you're uncomfortable with what your partner is doing is, instead of giving an ultimatum, share that with her and be like, hey, you're going to do what you're going to do. You're an adult. I just want you to know that when you talk to this guy or when you go out with this guy, it makes me feel really uncomfortable and I don't really like it. Now, a woman who is very attracted to you and sees your relationship as a high priority will, by her own volition, want to change your behavior. Because a woman who loves a man and who makes him her highest priority with respect to relationships isn't going to want that person to be unhappy and uncomfortable and upset. So she's likely going to change the behavior. If, on the other hand, you say that, hey, it makes me really uncomfortable, I don't like it when you do this, and she says, well, that's kind of your problem. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I mean, there's a that's yeah, she is an adult. She's going to do what she's going to do, and you can do what you're going to do, right? So that's part of the acceptance. So can you accept this about this person? She's clearly in this case, second case, she's not going to change. Is this something that is a deal breaker for you? If it is, rather than try to change the person, exit the relationship. Okay, that's my practical advice. Okay, what's up next? Jocko Clote, hope I'm saying that right. Thank you for your donation. I'm 26, making six figures in a third world country. Wow, that sounds tough. 5'8" and in shape, but I have a baby son. Okay. Will having a son affect my dating life negatively? And if so, significantly or not? New world for me? Tia. What does Tia mean? Someone's got to tell me. I mean, it depends. What I found, I don't have a kid, so I can't speak from my own personal experience, but from my friends and from the people that I've consulted, I found that being a single father is far less detrimental to dating than being a single mother. A lot of guys will just completely swerve on single moms. The attitude is sort of like, you know, I want to, I can't be the priority in your life because you have a kid. And potentially something must have happened for some man who made a baby with you and potentially married you in front of God and all of his friends and family decided that I can't do this anymore. So that's kind of a red flag for a lot of guys, right? With uh, with women, it's less so because what I've found is that a lot of women see a single dad and they think, oh, he's open to kids. Maybe he'll have more of them with me. It's like one of the struggles that a lot of modern women face is getting a guy to settle down and start a family. You already have done that. So there's like proof of concept here with you. She might be jealous of that child at times or with your baby mama if she's still in the picture. And she might want to make another baby with you to kind of balance the scales, as it were, and to solidify her place in your life. But I don't think it's necessarily a problem. It just might make things more logistically complicated depending on the childcare support that you have. But I don't think having a kid is necessarily a deal breaker for a lot of women. Okay. Ife Akano, hope I'm saying that right. Thank you for your donation. I'm losing attraction to my boyfriend because my needs aren't being met. Security. I know he's still building his ship, aspiring actor, but I want to plan for the future. How do I know when to cut my losses? Well, first of all, I'd like to suggest respectfully that that's probably not why you're losing attraction for your boyfriend. Why do I say that? Because you probably had even less security when you first started dating, and you probably had much higher attraction for this guy then than you do now. Otherwise, it wouldn't be lower now, right? Security is something that generally increases over the duration of a relationship. In fact, right? So the fact that you're not getting something that you haven't gotten shouldn't really impact your attraction because you didn't have it in the early phases when you were attracted to him. Hopefully that makes sense. So there could be other reasons why you're losing attraction. And I think that's likely, it's not mentioned here, but likely having to do with the cost benefit comparison analysis that's either going on consciously or unconsciously. Maybe you've come into contact with some guys that you think might be more successful and potentially can give you what you want on a shorter time frame, right? So it's hard to know when to cut your losses and to leave. The fact of the matter is that most relationships won't be the one that you have for the rest of your life. That's just what it is, for better or for worse. A relationship that ends is not necessarily a bad relationship or a failed relationship. I think that we can all do better at changing our general attitude towards that. Because if we don't, we rob ourselves of a lot of our life because we spend a lot of our lives in relationships that don't last for the rest of our lives. And we can be grateful for the time that we've spent with this other person potentially. So I don't know, he's still building a ship, aspiring actor. I don't know. Like security generally doesn't make people more attracted, right? It's like you don't go into a club and offer security. So I don't know why you're losing attraction. It could be that um, some of well, one of the things I talk about on in the book or in the channel, I forget which one, is that some of the things that we're initially attracted to, once the limerence wears off, are the same things that annoy the shit out of us. So, for example, if he's an aspiring actor, maybe he was, um, very like fun and carefree and spontaneous. He didn't have a lot of responsibilities, so he's an aspiring actor, so he had to go to a lot of parties. He was socializing, um, but after some time, maybe that like spontaneity and fun might now read as irresponsible and immature. And now you're questioning whether you can build a foundation with somebody who looks different. But the issue is that, oh, yeah, I talk about this in The Lens of Attraction, which just came out a little bit ago. The issue is that it's the same guy, it's the same behavior. The fun and spontaneous guy is the irresponsible, immature guy. It's the same guy, it's the same behavior. What's changed is the level of attraction. The same behavior gets interpreted in a more negative way as the attraction dips. But it's not that he's doing something different. It's the same behavior, right? So other things must be lowering your attraction. And I think it has to do probably with this feeling that you could do better. And that could be because there are some other guys who have entered into the picture, or you talked to your girlfriends, or you heard something on the media, and now you're kind of looking at your options in a different way, and you no longer feel like this guy is your best option. Okay, that's what I got for you. Okay. Elliot Wade, thank you for your donation. I like how sensitive you are towards everyone. I try. I fail a lot, but I try. Um, I don't. I don't want to make the world a more antagonistic and angry and awful place. And I also think that it's okay that we don't always agree with each other. I can tolerate that. So I do like to try to have respect for the human being and to take their concerns seriously and to speak on the highest level that I can to people. I find that to be where I feel like I can become the best version of myself. Thank you. Okay. Oh, thanks in advance. Okay, Jocko. Awesome, dude. Now I know. I'm learning the lingo. I'm a streamer now. Okay. Jake Woodruff, COP, 50 grand. I have no idea where COP is, though. Thank you for your donation. In any case, I'm 31 and making six figures. Fantastic. I love it. Look at these young guys who are just killing it. You're doing so much better than I was at that stage of life. I like the idea of kids eventually, but I'm afraid of marriage and the commitment to one woman for the rest of my life at this time. Yeah. I still have big goals that require a lot of my time and energy. Then don't get married. And there's something about what you just said that makes me think of something. I was on a trip to Morocco recently, and I went on a tour, and the local tour guide was explaining a little bit about the Islamic culture of polygamy, and he told me that in the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad calls monogamy, that is marriage to one woman, a marriage of fear, and that he recommends that it's good for a man to have 2, 3, or 4 wives. Now, there's responsibilities in that culture and religion that come with having multiple wives. But the idea here is that marriage to one woman is a marriage of fear, and that can be interpreted in a few different ways, but I thought that was interesting. Yeah, so one of the things I talk about in chapter 12 of the book is that I think the future of relationships come from, let's say, an intentional deconstruction of the hyperconflated model of marriage. That's a lot of big words. So what does that mean? So one of the reasons why I think marriage is failing is because we want it to be too many things. We want it to be a spiritual union with our soulmate, and we want it to be a fun adventure with a sexy lover. We want to be a co-parent and a co-business partner in running a family and raising children. We want it to be your best friend and your therapist, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just too many roles for one person to discharge. So the fact of the matter is that marriage, like the legal contract, is a different thing than co-parenting, having children. Like, you don't need to get married to have kids. You can, a lot of people do, a lot of people don't, which is different from cohabitation, which is you don't have to live together. Even if you're married, you don't have to live together. Who says? Who says you have to, right? Like, a lot of these things are just sort of like assumptions. They're just like, well, I just thought that this is what you do when you get married. Not necessarily. It's for the two people involved in a relationship to decide what their relationship is going to look like, what structure it's going to take. And I'm kind of just done with this one size fits all attitude towards relationships, because I see it fail all the time. And I think it's time that we question the structure as opposed to our own failings, which is generally what happens. Usually when a marriage doesn't work out, it's because we blame the people inside of it as opposed to the weight of what they were trying to carry. Maybe what they were carrying was too much, potentially. Sometimes it's the people. So what I'm saying is that you can begin to decouple some of these things in your mind. It's like, you don't have to live with a woman if you don't want to. You don't have to have children with a woman if you don't want to. You don't have to marry a woman if you don't want to. Or you can like mix and match these things. Obviously, not all women are going to be interested in that. Women in general, just like guys, are trying to get the best possible version of to get more of what they most want. And if you offer parenting, co-parenting, but another guy will offer co-parenting, cohabitation, and marriage, you're going to have to be significantly more attractive and maintain that attraction at a high level to compensate for getting less on some level, right? Because she's going to feel that. She's going to see that, and other people get these things and I don't get these things. And it's going to make her feel envious. So that will have to be compensated in another way. So it's not impossible, but it needs to be compensated. Yeah, it needs to be compensated in other ways, generally by being very attractive and emotionally involved and maintaining that level of involvement and attraction. But if you're not ready to get married, don't fucking get married. Like, there's plenty of time. 31? I say in the book, I don't think that guys should even begin to consider a serious commitment until they're 35, because it can take that long to get established. I mean, it sounds like you're doing good, 31 six figures. Okay, but there's still a lot of things you want to do. Yeah, as far as I can tell, kids take a lot of time. They take a lot of energy. Even if you're having this sort of like decontextualized relationship, like I just described, I don't think you want to be an absentee father, right? So if you have other things that you want to do, then fucking do those things. And it's going to be fine. The more you do, as long as you don't fuck anything up as a guy, you're likely with each passing year to grow your wealth, to grow your prestige, to grow your achievement, to get better at relationships, to get better at seduction, to get better at everything, because you'll have more practice. So, like, you should just become a more attractive option as you age. Now, of course, men can age out of this just like women can, but we have a longer timeline, for better or for worse. So don't get married if you don't want to get married. Okay, Brandis, thank you for your donation. 21 male, I struggle with the idea of relationships having an adored adorer. How can I feel emotionally fulfilled in the prior role as a romantic? Are you asking, I assume that what you're saying here is, how can I feel emotionally fulfilled as the adored? Especially if you're a romantic. And I would say it's tough. I don't think you can as much. It's more difficult to feel emotionally fulfilled as the adored. As I talk about in the book, the adored only gets to be loved by the one that they're with, while the adorer gets to be with the one they love, which is much more emotionally fulfilling. It's the more romantic posture too. So if you're a romantic, you might be more comfortable in the adorer role. Also, like I argue in the book, most people do want to be the adorers. Most people want that emotional fulfillment. They feel like it's one of the most meaningful and precious experiences they could possibly have in their lives, to be with the one that they love, right? That is the more romantic posture. It also involves putting somebody else a bit on a pedestal to adore them, which is also somewhat of a romantic idea because, all of our gods have clay feet, as it were. So if you want emotional fulfillment as a romantic, you probably want to be the adorer. The issue is that you're a man. And that's, in my experience, both as a young man personally and in the thousands of sessions and consultations that I've given to men, that's often a liability, especially as a young guy, because women generally want to be the ones to feel that way. As much as you like that emotional fulfillment, women like that emotional fulfillment even more in general, right? And if you're getting it, you're kind of robbing her of the opportunity to get it herself. And that's going to deprive her of a significant um, benefit that she went to a relationship to accrue. That's going to make it more difficult for you. In general, there's also hypergamy, where women generally want older, taller, stronger, more successful guys, which both literally and figuratively mean that they want to look up to their men. And that's going to be tough because when you're 21, if you're like me, you've got fuck all, and no one really can look up to you unless you happen to be very tall, right? So I've also found that that tends to change as I aged. When I didn't have very much as a young man, it was almost inevitable that I would look up to others who had more in many respects. And let me tell you, there's some beautiful young women out there. And so they're full of this beauty and this radiance. Of course, and if you're not successful, you're not established, you're not grounded, you're not in your own, you haven't really found yourself yet, how could you not be looking up at that radiant beauty, right? So I think that's often the posture of young men. But what I've realized in my own personal life is that as I've grown and I've found myself and I've built something worthwhile and I've developed status and wealth and I've learned self-discipline and all these other things, and I've now become a man of great value, it's much easier not to be looking up at every pretty girl that crosses my path. You know what I'm saying? So I think that also might be something that you age out of, though I've met a lot of very old, doting, romantic men. So take that for what it's worth. Philip Ayer, thank you for your donation. Dr. Orion, is there a way for purpose to act as a plate in spinning plates while dating? I agree with all of the positive psychology of spinning plates, but it feels like it's chasing women at around woman 3 to 4. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to try my best with this question because I don't fully understand it. Looks like there's a few questions too. So spinning plates means that you're dating multiple women simultaneously. Yeah, it's generally a good strategy. At around 3 or 4, it feels like chasing women. Like, does that mean that it feels like it's more of like a job? It's more of an effort after you get 3 or 4 women to get even more than that? I would definitely agree. Like, 3 to 4 women is plenty for most guys. Those women generally each are going to require some share of time and attention and energy. Not always money, but generally you need money. And if you're giving that to 4 different women, like, how much time do you have left over for yourself? Probably not a lot, right? So you have to, and I've seen this, is that guys can sometimes just get fallen into this like mania where I just have to keep acquiring, I just have to keep chasing, I just have to keep like spinning plates, like, but to what end? Like, on some level, the psychological benefit to having multiple options as a guy is it kind of keeps you in a non-hungry, non-desperate state where no one woman is all that powerful in your life, which allows you to kind of like make confident, directive decisions with respect to your life and your relationships. Whereas if you put all your eggs in one basket, it can be very difficult to choose between all of your emotional and sexual needs and your own self-respect or your own dignity or your own higher purpose, right? So it's easier to do that when you have multiple options. That's, in my opinion, the biggest ROI with respect to spinning plates. But there's like, at a certain point, if you get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I mean, I don't know if you're getting more value for the expense that you're putting in at that point. Like, that's just how it is. Um, is there a way for purpose to act as a plate in spinning plates? I mean, yeah. I mean, there's going to be, because you can really only do one thing at once. This whole idea about multitasking is really just means that you're doing one thing at once, switching rapidly between multiple one things, right? So there has to be a dedicated time in your life where you actually are taking action and making progress with respect to your higher goals and your purpose. Otherwise, it's just an abstract ideal, which means fuck all. Like, lots of people have well-meaning, good sounding ideas in their heads. Well, I'm a fan of justice and courage, and I want to build, but what are they doing about it, right? It's very easy to like enshrine some of these ideas in your heart, or to think that you're a better person than you really are. It's another thing to actually put them into action, because the world is so imperfect and so fucked up in many respects that as soon as you start to try to put an ideal out into the world, it's going to get smashed to pieces. Like, it's very difficult to build anything um, noble or idealistic in this world, because it just has to come into contact with reality in so many different ways, and it generally doesn't survive that contact. So you do have to find time to pursue your purpose. And if all your time is spent with women, unless your purpose is women for some reason, which I don't think it should be, in the sense that I think that a man's or even a woman's higher purpose needs to be beyond um, any specific relationship. And that can also be a guardrail against that all your eggs in one basket phenomenon that I was just discussing. So you don't necessarily every guy does not necessarily have to have multiple women, but he needs to have something that he is highly invested in that is more important than her. If he doesn't have multiple women, he needs that. And those are really the only two defenses that I can see against a man losing power in his relationship with a woman. Okay, it's either it's spread out over multiple options, or there's something even more important that it's not just an abstract idea, it's not just a good thing that he thinks about, that he's actually emotionally invested in, and he's willing to sacrifice the relationship if need be in the service of that higher purpose. Those are the things that keep men safe. All right, what do we got here? Historical Degoo. Thanks for your donation. I'm dating an avoidant woman who has deep trauma from witnessing her father's repeated infidelity with her mother and later partners. She didn't like some promiscuous actions I displayed, and I'm afraid her trauma may stop her from falling in love with me. Any advice? Yeah, very well might. Yeah. It says that you're just dating, which suggests that you are in the early stages of courtship. I would probably walk away from that relationship, which is why I say that you should not be very emotionally invested in anybody that you date for the first 6 to 12 months of that courtship process, because like, you're not going to learn about something on the first date. This is something that you might not come up 8 months into a relationship. Once there's some semblance of, okay, this is who we are, we're doing this, and then you stepped into some gray zone apparently that you thought was okay and she thought wasn't, and you elicited this response, and that response wouldn't have come out if you were just strangers on a second date. It needed to come out in the context of this perceived betrayal, which required some sort of commitment and security, I suppose, for that to occur. So it's really important, guys, to keep a tight rein on your emotion for the first 6 to 12 months of a relationship, because you can see things like this that will make it very, very difficult. I have an episode that's coming out soon. It's been recorded, it's scheduled, it just hasn't been released yet. It's called There Is No Need to Understand. So, as you'll recall, I often talk about dating as an extended hiring process, and that you, the man, are in the position of the employer because you, the man, are in the position to offer the relationship. You're going to ask her out. You're going to get down on one knee. The woman's not going to do it. You're going to give. Just like the other person is going to, the employer is going to extend a position, a job offer. It's for the person to decide whether they accept it or not, but they can't hire themselves, right? So if you're in a job interview and for whatever reason the interview goes very poorly, if the candidate is aggressive or bumbling or overly anxious or socially awkward or what have you, you don't have to understand why this person is the way that they are. That's like not your job. You're not this woman's therapist. It's your job to say, you know what, I don't think this is a good fit. And thank you for your time. And we're going to pursue other options, kind of a thing. So it's like you certainly don't have to extend a job offer to try to work through that awkwardness or that aggression or what have you with the candidate that you just encountered. Some people need to figure some stuff out before they can be reasonable partners for other people. Just like, and I'm saying this as a therapist, like not everyone is ready to date. Not everyone is in a position to have a relationship. Okay. And you can't tell who's who just from looking at people. That's what mental health and mental illness is all about. You often can't tell. Sometimes you can, but generally you can't, right? So, but that doesn't mean that they're like fucked forever. Not necessarily. It's just like an injury. You broke your leg. You're not going to be on varsity. You can't play. You have to heal. You got to heal your leg. No one's going to think that that's weird to say. But man, sometimes I get some flack when I say, this depressed person, this overly anxious person, this traumatized person, maybe this personality disorder, maybe they shouldn't be in a relationship. Oh my God, are you saying this? It's like, yeah, they need to heal. Playing on a broken leg is just going to hurt it even more. That's stupid. Don't force it. Wait, heal, take care of what you need to take care of, and then in a few months, you can get back in the game. So trauma is also a word that gets overused a lot. So I don't know. I think that it's often being used as an excuse for bad behavior. The other part of this equation is, well, what is she doing about it? It's like, I heard this a lot when I was dating when I was younger, as I'd go out with these women and, I'd hear, oh, my ex cheated on me, so now I have trust issues. And I was like, huh, okay, well, what the fuck does that have to do with me? She's like, well, I'm on a date with you now, and I want you to know that. So I want you, which is basically saying, like, I want you to accept that about me. And I'm saying, well, why do you accept that about you? Like, what is your trust issues a problem for you? What are you doing about this? Like, if it's not a problem for you, like, that's a problem for me on some level. It's like, if she has this trauma, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Like, what is she doing to overcome it? Or is she just sitting there and wanting to control your behavior so that it doesn't get triggered? Like, that's not a good situation, because there's more and more behaviors that are going to be added to that checklist that trigger her trauma reaction, right? And if she's doing nothing, then her emotional well-being is now being made your responsibility, which it's not. Okay, thanks for listening. Okay, DM Lynn, thank you for your donation. I appreciate it. Translucent Deno, thank you for your donation. I'm 38 from India. I keep wondering if I should settle down with the options I have or keep working on myself to get the partner I want. I do want kids in life. What's your advice? I don't know, man. You just gave me one sentence of context. I don't know. Like, so I'll speak in I can't advise you. I can't tell you whether you should settle down or get married based on just what you gave me, but I can give you some general orientation here, which is uh, all relationships that you commit to are some form of settling. Like you can't avoid that. Settling is inevitable, especially on a planet with 8.5 billion people, a lot of whom are in India, right? So it's like in that sea of functionally limitless optionality, there is somebody better for you out there. Like it's just the odds that you are with the single best person for you are vanishingly small. The question then becomes how much better and on what timeline? You don't know. You can meet this other person tomorrow or most likely in 1,000 years. Who knows? So the question now becomes, uh, I want to have kids. Okay, so now you have this other thing that's coming into your decision making process. Well, do you want to have kids by the time you're 40? If so, if so, I mean, you might want to consider one of your options that you currently have. Like the likelihood that if you were to break up with those options and meet somebody better than the best of your current options in the next year who also liked you and wanted to have a kid with you, actually pretty small, right? Like this is part of the reason why birth rates are going down is because people forget that, yeah, there are better options out there, but are you a better option for them? And do they also want to do the same things that you do on a comparable timeline? Like those are actually really rare confluences, which is why I talk about in the book that most people only get like 3 or 4 good chances in their lives. Um, so you kind of have to weigh that, like how bad do you want kids in what timeline? And do you feel like any of the options that you currently have, well, let's just focus on the best option that you currently have. Do you think that the best option is somebody that you can see reproducing with? Like, do you want your genes to mix with that woman's genes? And do you think that she would be a decent mother to your children? Can you get along? A lot of what I can tell having a family is sort of like running a small business. It's not so much about love as it is about um, like, can you work well together? Uh, Sometimes it helps to love that person. Sometimes it could be infuriating when you love that person. Sometimes you just have to like the person and you need to work well together. In fact, I think that would actually solve a lot of issues that we're currently facing if we just like lowered the bar, like for kids and marriage and things like that. Do I work well with this person and do I like this person? That can be enough. But it's up to you. I don't know you, man. So it's up to you to know like how important kids are on what timeline. And I also one last thing I'll say is that these two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Like, why do you have to let go of your options that you currently have in order to work on yourself? Like, you should always be working on yourself, whether you're in a relationship or not. And it's the idea that it's either I'm working on myself or I'm in a relationship that jeopardizes men's relationships. Like you never get to stop working on yourself. And that's a big part of what keeps the woman attracted and loyal. Okay, do a few more. What we got today? Philip Air, Dr. Orion. I'm starting an Ed.D. soon. Ooh, oh boy. I'm feeling imposture syndrome, probably imposter syndrome. Did you ever feel that way on your Psy.D journey? I'm 38 years old. You're the only person to pronounce my last name correctly. Thank you. Okay, right on, right on. Did I ever feel imposter syndrome? I don't think I did, but let's be clear, that doesn't mean I felt confident when I started. I don't think I had imposter syndrome because, like, pretend I wasn't a novice therapist. You know what I'm saying? Like, and everyone knew that I was under supervision. I wasn't pretending to be more advanced in my journey than I was. Imposter syndrome, I think, needs you have to feel like you're, like, more empowered or higher or more credible than you actually, like, you're socially recognized in that way than you feel on the inside. I didn't get that kind of social, and, I doubt that you will either. Like, grad school is a humiliating experience in many respects. It you're the lowest of the low, and it would be very difficult, I think, to feel like you weren't, um, that you were, like, in a place that you didn't deserve to be. So, I didn't feel imposter syndrome because of that. Like, I wasn't making any errors about the fact that I was in training. That said, I didn't fucking know what I was doing in the beginning. I had some ideas, and I had good intentions. I remember this is a funny story. Like, I got my first practicum was at a chemical abuse clinic, an outpatient substance dependency. Um, and after working, I think for 6 months there, I finally got my first client. And I got the folder. I thought I was so excited. We were still doing paper notes back then. I got the folder and the files. I'm like, "Ooh, I'm gonna be a therapist." And I meet the person in the waiting room, and I escort him back into the counseling room. I close the door, and, like, even before I can fully sit down in the chair, this guy just starts going at me. Just like, "Oh my god, thank God you're here." So it's like, "Oh, okay." So, like, it's been 6 days. Like my wife, um, I relapsed again, and I got into my car, and I drove into a telephone pole, and, I didn't know what to do, so I ran out of the car, and I've been hiding out on the streets for the last 4 days. And to make money, I decided I was so deep in the addiction, I started just having sex with guys, like, behind parked cars, to get a little bit of money, to get the drugs that I needed. And now, I lost my phone. I'm sure my wife is very concerned. The cops have to have found the car by now, and I'm just like, "Mm, well, that sounds like a pickle," you know? I was just sitting there. I didn't even get to introduce myself. I just remember spending the whole first session, just trying not to look surprised, just trying to look like, "Oh, yeah, that'll happen. Yeah, that'll run out of money, start having sex, get more drugs." Um, so it was quite a shock when I first started seeing clients. It took me some time before I heard a lot of stories. The great thing about my training is I just listened a lot. Now it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare at this stage of the game. Yes, was it like 11, that was 15 years ago. This stage of the game, it's pretty hard for me to hear something I haven't heard before. It happens every once in a while, but it's pretty rare. Um, so now I feel just more grounded. It did take me like 5 or 6 years to kind of find my therapist voice, my clinical voice. Before then, I think I was trying to be my own therapist because that was my only really point of reference, for how a therapist should act up until that time. So it can take some time for you to find your own professional voice. Um, but just remember that if you're feeling an imposter syndrome, it's like you're in training. You're in training, and I think everyone interacting with you knows that. And so their expectations for you, you know, may not be as high as yours are for yourself. So don't. There's no need to pretend to be more than that. You're on a path, and all you can do is focus on putting one foot in front of the other, and you'll eventually arrive at feeling fully invested in your professional. Okay, Elliot Wade, you just blew my mind. Happened. So I can leave the romantic impulse aside? Yeah, of course you can. It's it's generally not something that most romantics can just, like, flip the switch on. Uh, you can try. Uh, the romantic impulse, I think, is something that is deeply cultivated inside of most people by media, by movies and popular songs. Um, it's also, like I talked about in the book, it's a transfigured religious impulse, which I think a lot of human beings feel. There's this natural, I think, organic human tendency to admire and the high something larger than yourself, and like you come into this world, it's so big. There's the cosmos, it's ordered, it can be so beautiful. It's like, wow, like who did that? Where did this come from? There's this feeling of like awe and gratitude that I think are healthy and natural, excuse me, to human beings that correctly gets transfigured into a religious impulse, but incorrectly transfigured into a romantic. So I'm saying it's not just a simple switch. It's probably deeply culturally ingrained inside of you and may even be a transfigured religious impulse. But give it a shot. Yeah. You don't have to be a romantic anymore if you don't want to. Okay. We'll do a few more. We'll call it quits. Juan Pablo Narvaez, said that right? Mentioned that emotions are personal. How do you decide which emotions to honor? Great question. Yeah. So let's talk about this. It's one of my oldest videos. I really like this video. It's called Emotions Aren't Personal. Why? So behind every emotion is a thought. You can think of on some level the emotion to be the embodied reflection of that thought. So for example, if I think the thought and believe it to be true, I am about to die, most likely the, the embodied emotional reflection of that thought is going to be fear or panic. If I put that thought in 100 people's heads, 100 people are probably going to experience fear and panic as a consequence of that. It feels very personal because you're the only one feeling afraid and panicked, but that is just a reflection of an impersonal thought, which is I'm going to die, that is then validated and believed to be true. And these thoughts, they can be just put into all kinds of people's minds, and through that, the emotion it trickles down. So the issue is that we are subject to all kinds of thoughts. A lot of those thoughts are bullshit. A lot of those thoughts are wrong. A lot of those thoughts are irrational. That's another thing we're talking about. Feelings can't be irrational. Irrationality is a characteristic of thought. Only thought can be rational or irrational. Emotions just are. Um, you can have a real emotional reaction to an irrational thought. A lot of people do that. There's a lot of that going on. Where they have a real emotional reaction to an irrational thought. And this can be tricky because it's like the feeling is real, but the thought is not really grounded in reality. Actually, one of the tests to know whether a thought is grounded in reality is does it produce a big emotion or not? Look around, reality kind of is what it is. It's been trucking around for billions of years. There's not a lot of big dramatic things that happen. They happen from time to time, but most day in and day out is just sort of like humming along. You know what I'm saying? So if you're having these big wild mood swings and you're up here and you're down there and you're all over the place, chances are that's not actually an accurate reflection of what's going on around you, which is kind of just humming along. It always has. So generally, people with a lot of big emotions who feel a lot tend to think a lot, and those thoughts aren't always in line with reality. If they were, they'd kind of just be, humming along. Okay, so if we are subject to all kinds of thoughts, some of which are true and some of which are not true, some of which are rational, some of which are irrational, how do we decide which emotions to honor? Well, I talk about this in the video. I forget which one it is. I think we talked about it in the last live chat, actually, live stream. Um, I get this from Marshall Linehan, the creator of dialectical behavior theory, is you kind of want to examine your thought to see if the emotion is justified. There are justified reasons but we have emotions. For example, uh, there's guilt. That's the example I used in the video. Um, it's justified to feel guilty when You've done something you said you weren't going to do. Didn't do something you said you were going to do. You violated your own moral commitments. Like if you if your behavior breached one of those three things, it's right and good that you should feel guilty, right? So the feeling of guilt in those cases would be justified. In which case, you should relent the emotional impulse inside of guilt, which is make amends, to say I'm sorry, ask for forgiveness, to try to restore things to how they were before you transgressed. If, on the other hand, you're feeling guilty, but none of those three things happened, if you're just feeling guilty because somebody's upset, if they're upset with you because you broke an expectation that they had in their own mind, that's something that you agreed to, your guilt is not justified. You'll feel it, but you have to examine, like, I didn't actually do anything I should feel guilty about. I just feel uncomfortable. I don't like the fact that this person's upset with me, but, like, maybe they're not upset with me for a justified reason. You'll still feel the guilt, but the way to get rid of that feeling when you examine that it's unjustified is to, so if the impulse instead of guilt is to apologize and to make amends and to repair, the opposite of that is you don't apologize and you don't ask forgiveness. And you kind of just say, "Hey, I don't think I did anything wrong. I can see that you're upset about that. Um, you might want to examine why you're upset about that. Like, is there an expectation that you had in your mind that you now feel is violated? Like, unfortunately, I'm not really responsible for that expectation that you had, et cetera, et cetera." So that's kind of how you simplify that. Okay, let's do three more questions and then we'll call it a day. Okay, Angel Garza, thank you for your donation. How did you know that PhD was your path? I'm a 19-male entrepreneur deciding between scaling my marketing business or going through the journey to PhD. Do you think it's possible to do both? Ooh, it would be really tough to do both, man. I mean, I did work and paid my way through grad school, but I was working at least 110 hours a week for 4 years. First year wasn't as bad. Year 2 through 5 was tough. Like, I didn't take a day off in 4 years. I ended up feeling very, very burnt out, which is a real thing. It took me about 10 months to recover from that. It was not a fun process, but because of that, I didn't have this debt when I got out of school, which positioned me very well for the rest of my career. And it taught me a lot about what I was capable of accomplishing. So it was a crucible that I'm glad I passed through that I would never ever do again. Like, it's just it's, so is it possible? Yeah, lots of things are possible. Are you going to like it? Probably not. Might it be good for you? Yeah, but not everything that is hard, is painful, is necessarily beneficial. It will help you grow. Um, how did I know that psych was my path? I didn't. So when I was your age, I wanted to be an actor. I was an actor. I was living in New York and I was working in the theater. I didn't decide to become a psychologist till I was 28 or so. It took me about a year and a half between I didn't want to be an actor anymore. I wanted to be a psychologist. Like, it didn't happen overnight. And those two things weren't the same moment. I knew that I didn't want to be an actor anymore. I was dissatisfied with that life and the lifestyle could afford me, but I didn't yet know with any degree of conviction what I wanted to do instead. So that began this like due diligence period. It took about a year where I examined lots of different possibilities. I talked to people who worked in those jobs. I did research on the internet. I did self inquiry because it's really important to know what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Not what you think should work for you, not what you want to work for you, but what actually works for you. And that's why I wanted to leave acting on some level. It wasn't a good fit for who I actually was. I'm functionally an introvert, which is part of why I was so uncomfortable being an actor for as long as I was. So it wasn't a good fit for me. Introverts can be actors, but it's just it's easier to be an extrovert. So I needed something that, among other things, had a better fit for who I actually was, not who I was. And over time, based on that due diligence and my self-examination, I came to the fact that, okay, maybe I could be a psychologist, be a therapist. And I did research into that process. And there's professional schools and there's research institutions, these different degrees. There's the Psy.D, master's degrees at various levels, all these different licensing. Well, what do I want to do? So at that point, it was really important for me to begin with the okay, where do I want to be in 10 years? I said to myself, well, I'd like to be a therapist in private practice. I'd like to have an office. I'll have a little shingle inside, be my own boss, see the people that I want to see. I'll make decent money. I'll have good time flexibility. I'll be helping people in a meaningful way, I hope. I'll be dealing with intellectually interesting problems. I think I can do this. And I look back there. Um, it's very easy to know which route to take when you know where you want to go. If you want to go to Chicago, it's very clear that you should go down this road and not this road, right? If you don't know where you're going, all the roads look the same. Some level. Hope. Two more. Oh, hey, Pearl. I sent you a DM today. I moved to Chicago. Would love to fly you out for an interview. Okay, I got the here today. Text that way. Welcome to the States. Definitely open to it. Talk soon. Okay, is that everything? I said I would do a couple more. Not seeing any new. Okay, here we go. DM Lynn, my girlfriend has lots of dating kissing pictures. I told her they make me uncomfortable, disrespected. Am I controlling if I ask her to take them down? Like, she has pictures of the two of you kissing, or like pictures of her kissing like her other people that she's dated, and take them down. So she's posting them on social media. Okay, so let's say that I'm assuming that she's taking pictures of the two of you in a romantic context. She's posting them on social media. Yeah, I don't necessarily love that myself. I'm a very private person in many respects. So it kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier, is that I think you can talk about how it makes you uncomfortable. I would shy away from giving ultimatums. Um, you can ask, but be prepared to listen to the answer and to accept the answer. And that answer might, on some level, be a sign of attraction, a level of attraction, investment in a relationship, and it will also potentially be a level of your attraction as well, because when we like someone more and we love someone more, we're willing to accept them who they are. But if this is a deal breaker for you, that's fine. Then, based on her response, you might not want to be in that relationship anymore, or don't be in those pictures. Like, she can't post pictures if you're not in them. So that's what you can do in response as well. So it's like, hey, if she says, "No, it's my account, I can do whatever I want," you can say, "That's really cool. Well, I can do whatever I want. I don't want to be in these pictures." So um, that can potentially cause a shift, and there might be room for some sort of negotiation at that point. Okay, and let's see. We'll do one more. Okay, here we go. Uh, XAU CAD trader. Thank you. What do you think about men just checking out completely? You said we need to build the sun first, but can one be happy with just the sun? Absolutely. I know lots of guys who are happy with just the sun. Like, life can be very peaceful without women in it for a man, especially if your life is going well. If you're taking care of yourself and you have friends and you're healthy, have an interesting lifestyle that works for you, and you just want to sail around to your heart's content, you are more than welcome to do that, my friend. It's like I say in the book, captains don't need to have passengers to be a captain. The captain can be the only one on board, and he can sail around the ocean's blue to his heart's content. It's not the passenger, right? It's these other things. It's having a boat, learning to sail, spawning a course. Um, it's hard to check out completely, man. I mean, that what generally keeps coming back for better or for worse is the sexual instinct. You have to figure out something around that. It's like I know so many guys that I've canceled over the years who, after some disappointing experiences, I'm fucking done with it. I just can't take it anymore. And like they're done for a month or two, and they're like, ah, man, I'm lonely and I'm horny. That's what gets them to come back, for better or for worse. So it's easier to check out if you aren't lonely or horny, because those are the things that tend to make men go back to the dating market. But no, I don't think you know women in your life in order to be not at all. In fact, it's probably best if you don't go to your looking for fulfillment, which is what I was talking about, and that's cherry on top. Um, and I think more and more men are checking out, just like more and more women are checking out as well, because our relationships these days are not based on need as much as they are based on want. Want is a capricious thing at some level. So I don't think there's any problem with that. I don't think necessarily that every man has a duty to humanity to life up and reproduce with them. Um, so yeah, if you're happy living that life, God bless you. All right, guys. So that's the what I got for you today. I want to thank you for the questions. There were some good ones. This was helpful for you, and to once again talk about my new member community, Captain's Quarters. So one of the things I wanted to do was to create a space that actually had some dialogue. So I do these live streams periodically, but as you can see, it's just me monologuing. In the Captain's Quarters, we're going to do bi-monthly, twice a month group consultations. And Zoom. So like, I'm going to see you. You're going to have a voice. You're going to be able to talk to me, and I'm going to be able to talk to you, and you're going to be able to talk to the other folks in the community as well. So it's a way of getting a much more personal, involved take on some of these issues and to come closer to each other and to me. Um, I'm also going to be having invited guests on, hopefully on a monthly cadence. Where, once again, you can talk to and ask questions of these folks, uh, get your answers from them directly, not just from recorded YouTube videos. I do discounts on individual consultations for members. That's just to start with. I think it's going to evolve over time. Right now, it's $100, which I think is kind of pricey. But this isn't a course. This isn't just something that I'm churning out to get 10,000 subscribers. It needs to be small. Otherwise, people won't be able to have a voice in the community. So it needs to be a little expensive to keep that. I do think that the value justifies the cost. Like the two bi-monthly consultations, say that $50 each, they're an hour and a half, so you get it's $33 an hour just for the consultations. Um, Not so bad. So if you're interested, then please check out the community. The link will be in the description. Thanks for your consideration, and I will see you next time. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me.